are. Henri, nice to see you again.
Hello. Good to see you again. Hello.
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming back. And today I think we have a little bit of a fun game to play. So thank you in advance for participating.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to participate. Are you going to explain to the viewers what's about to happen?
I am, yeah. But before I do that, I want to open up your latest little mini puzzle and look at it for the first time because I haven't seen it. But what I expect to find is some really good surfaces, amongst other things. So let me just take a peek and
Go
like
for
literally
it.
looking now. You could see it, yes?
Yep.
Yells repeatedly ignoring boundaries about new computer system. Makes perfect sense on the surface. Editorial worker in tabloid, finishing early with book. It all fits the same environment. Let's see. Mouse feature just about finally working. Menu item is small cooked. How do you say that word?
Place.
Okay. All right. Uh,
Do
yeah,
you do you know
small.
fish over there? It's a place. It's a fish is a place.
Yeah, it's a type of fish.
Yeah.
I wonder if we call it something different, but yeah. All right,
Possible.
cool. Knives from Burma found in Germany and primarily all these surfaces are great. Now I'm going to show you real quick. Uh, Here's my latest effort, and you get things like isolate holy book about a tooth. Literally makes no sense. Uh, let's see.
Neptune's Dragon Song.
Arthurian legend recounted what frequent flyer does. No, he didn't. Inside Sensei's plot, chi estimate is most uneven. You get stuff like this
But you
because
did
it's like
you
the
set
like
yourself a very hard challenge with this one, so the surfaces are not going to be easy to make the words that you chose.
yeah. But so I admire your work. I love making these puzzles. They take me forever, but it's fun. I'm very early in my journey, and as we talked about last time, there's a whole big learning curve and progression curve. And to get to the point of today's session, I created this for you. Uh,
Okay.
so this is option number one, 8 clues.
But
And
several of the words are the same. But okay.
this is option number two. So you volunteered beforehand to try to clue one of these puzzles on the fly and sort of
Yeah.
talk about the process as we go. So,
I've got a strong preference for the second one,
okay. All right, cool.
because the first one requires multiple clues for the same thing, which is a
Yeah,
little bit of a tricksy thing to do and might take me slightly longer than a normal puzzle.
cool.
Um, so the second one feels doable. There was one word in there that I didn't quite get, which was toe. Is
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that either. But what I'm going to do is pause right now so that you could load it up because I sent this to you, although you haven't opened it yet. And it is correct that you just saw it for the first time, right?
it? Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to just pause for a second. Okay, Rob, Henri, or I should say, okay, Rob, Henri has selected grid number two.
Yes,
So
he
here
did.
we are. Hopefully it's looking pretty good. And I guess just kind of talk your way through what your thinking process might be.
Okay, so my first question was going to be, what does toto mean? But having just looked it up in Chambers, it's a secondary spelling of a kind of grass found in New Zealand, which I think counts as an obscurity. So, I'm just wondering why you threw an obscurity in. Is it deliberate? All the other words look reasonably straightforward. That's going to be the one where people say they've never heard of it.
Yeah. I thought it
I
was a
haven't.
fun word to pick because it's got the repetition going on. And sorry, somebody's cutting the grass right outside. I hope it's not too loud. Um,
No.
and then also, so what options, do you have when you're approaching a grid? Like do you usually think about whether you want to do something thematic or would that be in the construction of the grid itself? Or
That. That would be in the construct. So the most of the minis I've done since that format was released have been some sort of thematic, or there's been some twist to them. I think there's only been one where it was just a straight here's a bunch of clues. And I think the format really lends itself to that because you've got if you've got a theme or a special instruction trick to work with, you don't need to make it work for an entire massive 15 by 15 grid with 30 odd clues. You can just make it work for six to eight clues.
Totally.
So mostly I've used minis for doing sort of tricksy little things that I probably couldn't do in a full size grid.
Yep.
Um, I think this is an interesting set of words in terms of options on how to clue most of them.
Hmm.
Auto one is still bothering me. I
Plus,
might, I
plus,
might do that.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're all right. Yeah, I think in terms of cluing these, there's only six. I'll probably just start trying to do them in order, and if I get stuck on something, just skip on.
Cool. But then
Then
also there's if you wanted to incorporate it, which you don't have to at all, it seems like a crime has occurred or a crime is perhaps about to occur, um, committed by a Nina. So I'm not sure about that.
oh, you put a Nina in. Oh God. Okay. Um, what's the Nina? I'm not seeing an. Is it an edge Nina? I'm looking in the wrong
Yeah,
place.
I think you're looking in the wrong place by
Oh,
looking at
I am looking at the wrong start point. I've just realised what the Nina says. Of course, it's my bloody name. Yeah. I was looking at the old Bane. I was thinking, what the hell does ob mean? Um, right. Now I know why you've chosen those words because you were getting a Nina in. Okay.
yeah. So
Um,
if
you
you
did
want to add a
give
little
me a
bit
Nina.
of help.
That's sneaky. Right. Okay. So I now see why there's a Nina. Um, might explain Toto as well. Right.
So I'm going to try to do less talking because that is probably going to be really distracting. But
I mean, I'm staring at it very suspiciously to see what else you're talking about. Because you said that a crime has been committed. I can see Rob and Henri around the edge, but
yeah, that's it. That's all. Just
that's it. Right. I don't need to be any more suspicious than I already am. Okay.
no, just Rob Henri, and that's good enough.
Okay. Um, one other slight practical thing is Rugrat two words or one? It's one word in the iconic children's animated series, but I guess it might be two in real life.
Yeah, so that would be something I would have to look up too.
Just double check. I'm very big on getting the right numeration.
So
Uh,
then you would have the option, is that correct? Like if you wanted to keep it one word, your definition would be the character or the series. And
yeah,
if
I wouldn't do that because that's not a dictionary word, and in the series name, it's plural. So I don't think Rugrat one word would be valid. Rugrat is two words in the dictionary. Um, so we'll keep it two words. You're right first time.
yep.
Okay, so right, I need to stop looking at the grid because I'm not allowed to edit it. So I just need to go back to the clue writing view. Okay, right. There could be some long pauses in this. It might need to edit
Yeah.
out. But
Yeah, that's okay. I could edit it later, but also hopefully people who are watching are playing along and I would love to see other people share the clues that they came up with for the same words.
yeah. So one of the things I always do when I look at short words, and these are all six or seven, um, is just see if they simply break down into smaller parts naturally. So you can just do a simple um, charade. Um, doesn't necessarily work with most of the bottom output, which breaks down into its component parts, so you can't really clue it that way. Um, are you and Grat? Grat's been great without an E on the end, so are you being rugby the game? Um, uh, tar backwards is rat. Tar being sailor. Gur. There is a word gur, but it's quite obscure. Um, I think that one is probably going to end up a simple charade with the deletion. Um, the other thing to do with that actually though is could you do it now? Could you do a full reversal? I'd love to do an insertion container, but I'm not quite sure. I can make UGI mean something, but then it's just going in rat itself, which is kind of self-referential, which is a trick that some people do. But
Hmm.
I'm going to move on from Rugrat. Ipswich is it a town? I think it's a town, not a city, isn't it? Is it a town or a city? I need to be really clear about that because people from Ipswich will be very annoyed if I misname it. Let me just check if Ipswich is a town or a city because that could help with the
But do you find yourself like Googling around a lot while setting while putting these things together?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for real also proper nouns. If it's a person or a place or
Hmm.
a it's got to be accurate. Ipswich. Ah, the football team's called Ipswich Town. That's a clue, isn't it? So Ipswich is a town.
And then
That's
there's
one.
another one in Massachusetts in the U.S.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure ours was first. In fact, Ipswich is one of England's oldest towns. It goes back to Anglo-Saxon times, so that's definitely older than the one in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Ipswich. So there's an obvious thing there about switch without a T, so a timeless change or something. Change taking time. IP. I mean, IP is not great as a set of two. I mean, that's like intellectual property, internet protocol. It doesn't really work. Um, Something about quietly taking time. P for quietly as a music notation.
Hmm.
Uh, Switch being a change, taking time. Uh, there's lots of words including I. I mean, you could use the self-referential Henri, setter, writer. It could be one. Uh, Actually, P is quite flexible in terms of its abbreviations. P can be power, pressure, parking. Towns, parking between something changing due to, I don't know. Anyway. Um, right, Toto, which I think we've established is a secondary spelling of an obscure word, which makes it doubly obscure. Um, but something about going toe to toe without the two in the middle, something about repetition of body parts, two body parts in grass down under.
And then it's also a brand name for a certain type of socks, but that you wouldn't want to use brand names in a
I
puzzle.
would use, unless it was a massive brand name, I might use like a Hoover or a Coke, but I'm not using
Okay.
a brand name of stock that I've never heard of. Um, oh, Toto. If it's pronounced Toto, there's a possible homophone with the dog from the Wizard of Oz, but is it pronounced Toto? And actually, even if it is, would people know that because it's an obscure word? So actually, I think a homophone for an obscure word is very unfair because nobody knows how to pronounce it.
Mm.
No, it's pronounced toy toy.
So when you
Toy
get a
toy.
word like this, would you be leaning toward trying to give the solver all the letters in some form or another, or not necessarily?
Um, yeah, so to be absolutely honest, I'd be looking to put a different word in completely, but that's not part of this game. For any obscure word, my general rule of thumb is to use one of the simpler. cluing mechanisms and put the letters in the clue. So not synonym based, but plain sight letters in the clue and just use simple instructions to tell people what letters to use.
But
One nice thing about
you're also not afraid to have people like need to turn to the dictionary, right? Or does it?
um, it depends. It depends what you want. I mean, if this and this being in the service of a Nina makes it understandable and acceptable and forgivable. But generally speaking, 6 words and 5 of them being quite mainstream and one being really obscure is very unusual. I think you'd either have something that was straightforward enough to solve within, 5 minutes, or you'd have something that was a bit chewier. But this is kind of 5 parts simple, 1 part chewy. Um, so I think people will need to check the definition, but don't. I think they'll need to do that after they've got the wordplay to work. So the idea with an obscure word is you want people to get to the answer and then have to check it. You don't want them to be looking up a long list of New Zealand grasses
And do you
for some.
generally want, do you want your clues to be solvable on their own, like without any checking letters, or are you okay if that word, for example, becomes solvable once some of the surrounding letters are?
I'd say in a mini, inevitably, if there's one difficult word, then you're gonna get the checking letters for the rest. So I think you use the checking letters and simple wordplay together to get to it. Let's just see which letters are actually. Uh, so you're gonna have a T, an E, and actually you're gonna have one of each of the letters that you're repeating, which is
Yeah.
um. I think there's a possibility. It took me a stupid amount of time to see it, but if somebody sees the Nina forming, they could add in the E before they've got anything else, and they've only got 2 letters to pop in. But I do think the key is going to be to if you make the wordplay simple enough, people are going to know they've got the right answer.
Hmm.
Um, the dictionary check is just to confirm it's a real word.
You know, it's interesting. The fact that it's one of each letter could could be an argument for making that type of clue that most people hate, which is the letter bank clue. It could be a
I'm
for
to
that.
do that. I just don't.
I know
I
you will.
don't even acknowledge the existence of that as a valid clue device. Um, okay, so I've just looked at those three. Output, uh, that'd be fairly straightforward to clue if we come up with 2 interesting synonyms for out and put and get them to work together in a sentence with a word meaning output. Um, because the kind of words have probably got lots of slightly different meanings. So we could spin that into a short, meaningful surface and it's still mean output. The tricky thing is with words that are essentially just compounds of 2 other words, is um, making the clue distinctive enough that the definition and the wordplay don't overlap hugely. So there's this thing that we talk about in crossword setting about things being same-sided, which I did discover there is actually a proper term for, which is etymological overlap. But yeah, same-sidedness. If to clue output, I needed to imply that something was being outputted with the synonyms that I chose, then I'm gone too close. Uh, Whereas out can be public, as in not private. The word is out. So that could be public something and output as the definition. So I think that's got options. That's relatively straightforward to come up with something for. Um, Brawler, I can see a B, a raw, and a lure. What's interesting about brawler is it means fighter, and you've got the word war backwards in the middle of it. So there could be a reversal that uses the idea of a fight or a conflict within it, and then just wrapping the B and the LER around it,
Interesting.
um, or making a you could make a hidden reversal, something rel war, but that could be a hidden reversal. fighter in adjective ending in REL or battalion. I don't know.
Mm.
Battle or battle. Yeah, I think that's got potential as a hidden reversal. Um, tycoon. Tycoon, you could clue by the definition by example. We just need to come up with a tycoon that's famous enough to meet that description. And who are the classic tycoons?
So I'm curious. It's interesting that you didn't just dive in and try to come up with a clue for one of the words, that you actually talked through all the words. And you're talking, I assume, is representative of like your internal process. It's
Well, no,
interesting.
weirdly, not quite. I think because the unusual aspect of this is that I didn't come up with any of these words. I think if I'd come up with the words and filled the grid, I'd probably just work through um, from top to bottom, um, or possibly from bottom to top. Because have you heard of the theory that you should start a crossword from the last clue?
Yeah, I have, because you get tired.
Because the setters got bored and started writing easier clues. I don't think that's necessarily true. It's worth a try. But anyway, I would generally, if I'd filled the grid, I would generally just try to work through in ascending or descending order.
Okay.
Um, I mean, the other thing is I've got a lot of puzzles I've done that are themed.
Hmm.
And sometimes you kind of have an idea on how to clue the theme words anyway. So then you sort of dot around and then fill in gaps rather than doing it in order. Um, but yeah, this is a highly unusual situation. Is that I probably wouldn't have chosen any of these words to glue, but
Good. Um,
I do think looking at each of them in turn before writing anything down is possibly sensible. But
yeah,
I am going to dive in, and I'm
that's
going to
it.
dive in. I'm going to dive in at what I think might be the easiest one to
Sure.
do, which is
I had
output.
two tiny observations about these words that I only thought of as you were talking, but should I keep them to myself for now, or
No, if it's helpful, please tell me what the observations were.
um I was looking at Rugrat while you were talking about Brawler, and I just saw Crawler, which is like another way to connect to Rugrat, possibly. Um, and then when you were looking at Ipswich, uh, possibly two T's taken out. You know, tip could be a word, and then the T out of switch could be taken out. But I think you're more than fine without my help.
Oh, no, see, I'm glad you said that because you have prompted another idea, which is not tip switch, but flip switch, which is a phrase in its own right.
Yep, there we go.
And I do like to think I'd come up with that eventually at some point. But yeah, if you don't consider it cheating to give me slight nudges, that was useful because I think flip switch has got some potential. Um, flip switch. So we'd need to lose the F and the L and a T. Flip switch. Um, I don't know how well this would travel outside of the UK, but when I think about flipping switches and a town, one specific context springs to mind, which is turning on Christmas lights.
Hmm.
So there is that concept of old British towns would have Christmas lights, and there'd be some dignitary were there to flip the switch.
Absolutely, yeah.
So flip and switch and town have got connections that you could spin a short phrase into. Uh, so losing FL, wasting time to turn on Christmas lights in English town, something like that. So I'm going to look at Ipswich now then based on this. One thing I do is I write random stuff in the notes until I'm happy with it and then cut and paste it in.
Cool.
Um, so it only gets promoted to the clue box if I'm happy with it. But yeah, this is going to be something about getting rid of F and L, getting rid of T. So it's going to be phrase is going to be turn on. If I could spell when people are. In English. Turn. Um, Although that's kind of an example that might need a perhaps turn on Christmas lights. Perhaps. Um,
Hmm.
but then we had the wasting time thing to get rid of the T. How do I get rid of an F and an L? Uh,
That's Florida, but that doesn't work.
Leaving Florida. Uh,
That's how I end up with my types of clues. I'll take anything I could get sometimes.
I think we were saying that what I might do is leave Florida to switch on the Christmas lights. Leave Florida. This doesn't really make sense as a surface yet, but the component parts of that. Leaving Florida, wasting time. Leaving Florida to waste time? Perhaps turn on Christmas.
We do that here too with the Christmas lights. So just so you know, here in the States. So
Oh,
you don't necessarily have to be constrained to an English town if you don't want.
so let me just make sure this still actually makes sense um, as a cryptic instruction. As a sentence, it kind of makes sense. Bizarre. Why would you leave Florida to waste time
Yeah.
turning on Christmas lights? But leaving Florida removes the FL. Waste of time removes the T. But the phrase we're applying that to is to perhaps turn on Christmas lights, which is flip switch. Um, I think that works. Tell me if you think it doesn't. I think as a cryptic phrase and a surface, it works. You can
Put it,
say it
put
doesn't.
it,
I like
put it in
it.
for now. Put it in for now. What's going to happen is I predict you're going to get a couple clues done, and then you're going to do a pass over everything, with,
Absolutely, I always do. I
yeah,
mean,
and,
apart from
and
it's quite long. The nice thing about the new setting interface is it automatically tells you when your clues are really long.
yeah,
So you have to count the words. So it's not complete, but I'm going to save that for now. Right, output I do think is hopefully a straightforward pair of synonyms that we can just string together. I'm just looking at chambers on my phone to look at how many different ways I can use the word out. Okay, public does seem to.
and then you have the Chambers Dictionary app and I guess the thesaurus. Is that what you're looking at?
Dictionary and thesaurus, and then the third thing I use a lot is the Bradford's crossword dictionary, which works in a different way. It just has like head words and gives you lots of related words, but by letter count as well. So
Okay.
that's really useful. It's very useful for setting and it's useful for solving, but more complex crosswords, which have got obscure words. Um, but no, my first protocol is always just the Chambers Dictionary. Uh, Output can just be production or product. So production of could be the start of the phrase. Production of um then again of it might be unnecessary start with, it might be something production. Or then asking me about production is that can mean different things. So that could be like a movie production or a
Hmm.
theatrical production. So if out is public, Uh, ooh. Public turning up at the start of the treacle production. Is that? So you've got public out,
Cool.
up, reversal at start of theatrical. And the nice thing there is one of the things that I really love to do is to split a phrase across wordplay and definition. So theatrical production might initially fool a solver's brain into thinking that's a single entity, theatrical production. So is that part of the wordplay? Is that the definition? It's actually a bit of each. So theatrical production should mislead, at least briefly, the solver into thinking that we're not talking about like factory production, which is what we are really. So I kind of like that because you've
Very,
got you've got public used like it looks like it's a noun in the surface, but I'm using it as an adjective. Turning up is a phrase, but it also means put the word up backwards to make PU. The one thing that absolutely screams in this is start of. So, any setter with an aims to sense is going to know that there's a T in there, unless it's a massive bluff, which it isn't in this case. So I do think that's got a couple of misleading elements in terms of parts of speech, and phrases that need to be separated. So I like that.
yeah, and in terms of like Fez's rubric for the duck and the rabbit, it's this one just is perfect. It has both. It has the surface that makes perfect sense, and all the cluing makes perfect sense. And that
Uh,
was interesting to
I,
see, to observe your little aha moment when you saw up, you know,
yeah.
it came together.
Um, Just you said before that you expect me to do a second pass. I've very often have a moment of clarity when I've decided that I've nailed it and I put it up in the clue field. I'll look at it again, slightly more suspiciously, thinking is that the best I could do?
Mhm.
And actually, if you think about a theatrical production, there's a better word that starts a really obvious first
Yeah.
letter indicator. Um, it could be.
Yeah.
If that's not too sneaky as a first letter indicator. If people thought that was a bit too stretchy, then it could be.
I think it's fair.
I'm going to use opening. I think opening is the more precise instruction because the opening of theatrical is the letter T, whereas if you say a premiere or a premiere, I think there's a slight stretch to that use of the word. So I think that works in every direction, that one. So I'm actually going to say unless I change my mind, I think that one's locked in. And it's 8 words. So, Brawler, I said we'd do something about a reversal. What I will need, though, and this is where Chambers comes in again, I would need a nice adjective that finishes with REL. That would go for war when it's reversed.
Yeah, I could see that you use you like using the app. At this point, I would be more likely to use like the A button and the square over there to the right side of the screen. Um,
Um, do you know what? I haven't got into the habit of doing that yet.
yeah.
There's some lovely tools that have been added, which I just keep forgetting are there. So I still reach for chambers. Having said that, I'm not happy with any of these possible words that would make hidden reversal. So that's not quite working for me. That I still like the war being in the middle of it, but it might have to be war is reversed. BLER, British. So yeah, fighter. Is British beer? Is British only Britain? So to check, it can be fighter, British, or something to do with war reversed. It's the classic le. Oh, this is perfect. Because it can be resistance.
See, that's cool. I would
Technically, it's
on
resistance. But I've seen R as resistance in crosswords so much that I'm going to say that precedent wins. So what we've got there, the component parts there, which doesn't quite hang together. So no, actually, even better than Britain is Belgium, because that was a site of a lot of action in.
I had to just pause real quick there. Thank you.
Right. So what I think might be happening in the surface is something about a fighter from Belgium, a way of reversing war, and then probably with the French resistance. Er, this is where I look at indicator lists. It's tempting to just say something like rejecting war, but retreating works in the context of a war. And I could be rude and say, especially where the French are concerned, but you retreat from, you can't just have retreat on its own, so that's not good.
Seems
Um,
learning.
I'm going to temporarily just put rejecting and possibly come up with a better idea before we finished. So fighter from Belgium rejecting war, the French resistance. The mosquito just landed on my hand. And it's gone again. Sorry, I'm not going to catch the mosquito, so let's just carry on. Um,
Need a pair of chopsticks.
Attention students, anyone taking the late bus, please report to the cafeteria. Anyone taking the late bus, report to the cafeteria.
Yeah, it's proof. It's proof. I work in a school.
Yeah, no, I believe you. Back from Belgium rejecting war with the French resistance. I'm going to say that's okay for now, but I don't think the reversal indicators are perfect, but it does what it needs to say so far.
Quick
Fighter.
question. A word in this case like with or like by or near or something like that. Is there a technical cryptic crossword term? Is that like called a connection word or like a juxtaposition word? Or I don't really know the word for that.
So I've actually seen different people use different words. So connection word or juxtaposition, I've heard. Actually, connection word and link word. Some people reserve for the word that goes between wordplay and definition parts. Um, but a simple word that just connects two bits of wordplay, like with or and things like at and to are slightly more controversial. But those I would just call juxtaposition words personally.
Okay, thanks.
Um, but I do think you need one to make a surface make sense here. So fighting from Belgium rejecting war with the French resistance.
Can you put against instead of with? I don't know if that really works well.
And this is where you can get slightly
Yeah,
more pedantic.
leaning
I
against.
think there's certain juxtaposition words that work whether you're going across or down, and there's others that work best in one of those situations. So I think there's a school of thought that says that you can use like with and next to and beside throughout because in the clue everything's horizontal. But the counter argument is that in the grid things are vertical if they're down. So you could use on or over to connect parts if they're down clues, but you shouldn't use by because by is a side by side thing. With is generic enough to be able to connect two things, whether they're going across or down. I think against is like by, in that it means side
Yeah,
by
I would
side.
agree. I didn't even realize it was down, to be honest. And also, let me also apologize for interrupting your train of thought constantly. I know this is a difficult task as it is, without
It's
having to do all the talking.
it's quite all right. I just think you might have to edit out some of the longers a little bit. Okay, so we've got three clues written, one that I'm actually happy with and two that I might return to. Um, I'm going to look at Rugrat. So Rugrat is an Americanism, so I'm going to have to use an American qualifier. 'Cause we don't use that term. Um, but and would I be right in thinking it just means kid, or is it like a kid of a certain age? Is it like a toddler? Is Rugrat something specific age range wise, or just mean little kid? I don't know.
Pretty much, yeah. Like the kind who is either in crawling stage or a little bit older than that,
Ah,
I believe.
kids.
I mean, I don't even know what the technical definition is. It's just
Um,
something we use casually.
I'm gonna refer to the Oracle. I think I did look earlier, and I think it did talk about crawling stage actually. A child, especially one not yet walking.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, I think we've got a couple of options on a definition. We could use crawler. There's words for small child, which are quite useful because they also mean other things. And the one I'm thinking of in particular is tot. Because you can also make tot mean a little drink. Um, tot of rum, briefly something. Tot of rum, briefly, and then you've got grat. So grat, great, but it would need to be greats because it's a tot of rum, singular. Um, great could mean against, annoy. Great can also mean drain or a cage or a grid. Um, great, great could be a fireplace. Why would you put a tot of rum in the fireplace? Tot of rum. I mean, it could be briefly, or it could be unfinished or abruptly. Oh, you could be slightly naughty here. A tot of rum by fireplace. Briefly. The briefly refers to both words. So it's a brief rum and a brief grate. Uh, is that like, well, people might turn the nose up at the separation of the two words to be treated with by. Um,
Do can you do fireplace rum, or is that too weird?
well, the words be in the wrong order then.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sort of run by sort of rum. Uh, no, so I don't like the by separate the two words I'm acting upon. So I'm gonna say sort of rum unfinished fireplace. Briefly is a bit of a cop out though. Tot of rum finished by fireplace. Uh, Tot of rum briefly by fireplace when finishing early, because that sounds like you're treating yourself to a little drink because you've knocked off work early.
Yeah.
Briefly, still a bit of a cop out, but interestingly, if we weren't using Totov, I'd be tempted to say like a short measure of rum, but
Mm. Now I have a quick rules question. Um, if you did unfinished rum, would that be legal, or does the indicator have to come after the noun?
no, unfinished. We're absolutely. I think an adjective applied to a noun in most cases in English, you can justify that there be a way of saying that without it being weird. So in crossword construction terms, um, so I think rum briefly and briefly rum can
Yeah,
both be interpreted as delete the last letter.
got it.
Um,
A nice clue.
but that works because briefly is just a simple adverb which is applying to the word in this case after, but could be before it. When finishing early is an adverbial phrase, so it wouldn't make sense to say to run briefly by when finishing early fireplace.
Yeah.
So you know, the order is contextual. So, but to run briefly by fireplace when finishing early. So one of the, I don't know whether I said this to you or whether anybody else has said this to you when you've talked to people about crosswords, but one of the tests is, can you imagine a real person saying that sentence or
Mhm.
that fragment? Um, Even if the context is slightly unusual, but you can imagine somebody say, "Oh, I had a tot run briefly by the fireplace when I finished early."
Sure.
It passes that test of a real world phrase,
Yes, and
not a,
I like these crossword puzzles because you get these little micro moments where you could almost feel the warmth in the room right there, or you could
yeah, because the
visually see it.
fire's on, you've got a little tot
Yeah,
of room on the go.
it's
Yeah,
nice. It's
yeah.
like a little having
Uh,
a sip of this and a little sip of that, a bite of this.
Yeah, I like the when finishing early as a deletion indicator. Briefly, I think is such a screamer that anybody seeing the word briefly should be looking for knocking the last letter off the word before or after. If I was cheeky and wanted to stretch it, I would just say top of run by fireplace when finishing early. But you would get somebody saying you've applied the instruction to two words separated by a juxtaposition, which right. I haven't done Tycoon, I haven't done Toto. Toto, we said that this is not even pronounced Toto, it's pronounced Toy Toy. Um, and it is. I do like the idea that it's grass from New Zealand, which makes it grass down under parts of your feet. Grass down under parts of your feet, Toto. I don't know whether that really says toe, or it says toes, but I'm going to start with grass down under. So here's an interesting one. Down under as a phrase, if the dictionary says it's supposed to be capital D, capital U, then I shouldn't decapitalize it. The dictionary doesn't say it's capitalized, so I'm fine.
Although,
But you know the capitalization that you can't falsely decapitalize a word that normally is, but you can falsely capitalize a word that normally isn't.
yes, yeah.
Grass down under part of foot,
And
and then
I
this.
see this shows my own naivety. I always thought down under was Australia alone, but I see that I'm wrong.
Um, I'm going to bow to the oracle here who says Australia or New Zealand.
Great. Love it. I love to be wrong.
Um, yeah, in or to Australia or New Zealand.
Perfect.
Okay.
Let's
Grass down under part of
again.
foot. You could say that again. I like you could say that again as a repetition indicator. Now, I will say that what
It
we did
also
on
has it's also homophony a little bit as far as like the again and the word to, but that's not what you're
this,
going.
although as I said, the pronunciation according to Chambers is toy toy. What I've ended up doing on this is not what I said I'd do. What I said I'd do is to put the letters TOE in plain sight, and I didn't do that.
Well,
But
you're
you
gonna get checking letters. You're gonna get enough, I think.
going to get three checking letters, and if you've spotted the Nina, you're going to get a fourth. So I'm gonna stick with that because actually I like the connection between grass, down under, and foot. So
Yeah, it's cool.
uh, I now like that word after hating it when I first saw it. So,
Is that what it takes for you to like a word? To have a positive cluing experience with it? All of a sudden you like the word.
yeah, but as I said, this is the weird experience of this is usually if I dislike a word so much, I just get rid of it or rewrite the grid, but you're not
Okay,
allowed to do that in this case. So.
cool.
No, to be fair, there's some instances where you've got a Nina that's so complicated. So if you've got a full edged Nina with you got 28 letters that spell a
Sure.
full sentence, you will end up with an obscurity that you hate. So you just have to put up with it.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm having that. I like that. I'm not sure I'll be able to improve on that in the time I've got available. I mean, if you gave me like a day after this, I could rewrite all of these, but I'm going to give you the best quick version of all of them.
Well, what might end up happening, interestingly enough, is like the final version, should there be a final version, might be different from what ends up, on film.
No, no,
So
I'm gonna commit what we end up with here, whatever I
yeah.
think afterwards, it's the output of this exercise.
Yeah.
Um,
And also a quick question, are you going to indicate some sort of hint that there's a Nina to look for or no?
um, I don't know.
All right, I'll ask you that later.
Yeah, let me think about that. It's tricky to hint to look for something without just saying look around the edge when you're finished.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do think it's ironic. I didn't even spot my own name when I first looked, so I'm Nina blind. Um, I'm gonna have a look at Tycoon and I'm gonna have a look again at Ipswich. Um, Tycoon. I was thinking about a definition um, by example, but I'm not totally sure who would meet the definition of tycoon enough for everybody to. Hmm. So there's two definitions of tycoon. I mean, they're related, obviously, but the two definitions are a business magnate, which I think is the regular one that most people would have said, but its basis is the title by which shoguns of Japan were known to foreigners. That's a bit obscure. If I was doing a barge thematic now and I wanted to disguise the definition, I'd
I see.
talk about shoguns in Japan, but that is slightly unfair when there's a more mainstream
Mm,
definition. Um,
okay, interesting.
I think so. There's some straight single word synonyms. Some that are close to others. So if I've just flipped to the thesaurus and seen things like industrialist, financier, capitalist, entrepreneur, and I think a lot of those are a little bit stretchy. An entrepreneur could be a solo entrepreneur, it doesn't need to be a captive industry. Industrialist is a good one though. Industrialist, I think, is probably nice. Magnet, I think, is so close to tycoon that people just, oh, magnet, 6 letters. Industrialist is slightly further away, I think.
Then we
It
have
hasn't,
big cheese, money bags, fat cat. Yep.
yeah, but I don't even know whether, and if I'm being specific about a definition, you could be a fat cat by just being appointed to the board of a big company that pays out like massive salaries. I think the idea of a tycoon is that they're kind of like a self-made empire builder, which I think is different to just being a capitalist. So I think industrialist is a good word. I think I quite like captain of industry, but hmm. What I do like is that this has got CO in the middle, which can mean business,
Mm,
company. It's got ON, which can mean working on. So you've got something, and you've got TY. Now, something to do with a word that's got a string of 2 letters that ends in Y is to make it an outer letter thing. So it's extremes of something beginning with T and ending in Y. Extremely something beginning with T and ending in Y. Outskirts of a place name. Outskirts of Turkey. Business working with industry. We need to do that. It is a down, so we need to make sure that the directionality of juxtapositions is correct. So that's in can you have outskirts of a country? Outskirts is more of a thing that you have for cities. I can't think of a city that begins with T and ends in Y. I would say Turkey just until we've got something else. Outskirts of Turkey. Business working for or another nice thing you can do in a down clue is you can use a phrase underneath another and say supporting, as in the bottom four letters support the top two letters. Business working to support extremely T something Y. Extremely tawdry, tacky, trustworthy. Trustworthy is a good word. Trust. Business working to support extremely trustworthy industrialist. How about that?
ETI, extremely trustworthy industrialist. 7 words.
So you've got the COON to support a T and a Y, and the whole thing means industrialist. I mean, it's not the greatest clue in the world, but it works. So I think
Nobody watching this sees the gigantic ticking clock that I have placed, right off camera. So they have to have.
we have been going for over an hour, haven't we?
Oh, look at
It's
this.
started tech. Right. I'm happy with Rugrats. I like that image. What I will do just to help is we will although what oh no. No. Did put it out. Do you make rum in America?
Do we make it? I would imagine somewhere. Typically.
Because the definition has to be tot of American. It can't just be tot because Rugrat isn't an British English phrase. So the US qualifier needs to be in there. So tot of American rum. Yes, tot of American has to be the definition. I did overlook that first time round. Slightly verbose. Um,
Which is great. And see, I would have no idea that's simply an American thing. And I wouldn't
yeah,
think to put the indicator. So this is helpful.
Chambers does specify if things
Okay.
English. Um, I mean, I could make that shorter by applying the deletion indicator to both words, but as I've said before, I don't think that's fair, so I'm going to leave that. I mean, I could have a shorter way of saying do the second deletion, but I like the image that conjures up
Mhm.
because it's a reason to have a tot of rum because you've knocked off early. So. Right, we're keeping Rugrat, but I've added in the American qualifier. Ipswich is probably the surface I'm least delighted with. but it does need two separate deletions. I think if I was going to look at this with a lot more time, I would look for a different way of saying flip switch in less than 5 words. But I like the fact that flipping a switch in a town is something that you do in a town publicly. It's a bit like the finishing early, having you run by the fireplace. I think there's a logic to the surface, even though it's a long clue.
Would you want to move the definition to the front of the sentence?
I did think about that earlier on actually, because there's a way of uh no, but you need to, how do you, so if you put town at the front, how do you denote that Florida's leaving? Leaving's a good one actually, because leaving can, it can make, you can leave a room, but you can leave something in the room. So leaving can actually mean the opposite of itself.
Yeah, yep,
You either leaving it in place
yeah.
or it um I think I think moving the definition to the front causes more problems than it solves. I'm gonna say that's all right. To be fair, when I started this, I did think this isn't going to be my finest hour. So. Um, I'm actually genuinely happy and would use the Rugrat
Hmm.
and Toto Toy Toy. Um,
Yeah.
and these bottom two are a little bit will this do, but and for Brawler, it's really I would with more time try to find a better way of saying that we're reversing it without saying rejecting. Um, Fighter from Belgium. See, a lot of the reversal indicators only work with another conjunction. So, you could say retreated from or recalled to, but rejecting works without a conjunction. Um, oh, oh, oh. I have just realized we put war in plain sight and I didn't need to. We could
Yeah.
use a symbol, obviously. Um, Sorry, that was a placeholder from writing the component parts. It doesn't need to be plain sight at all. So a fighter from Belgium mounted a battle with the French. Mounted. Do you mount a battle? I don't know. And is a battle of war? I think a battle and war are acceptable synonyms. Um,
And one other quick question, why past tense rather than mounting? Because
uh,
I always get confused about like how that comes across or if there's any sort of rule about that or unwritten rule
that's
or
a really interesting point. But generally speaking, crossword clues should be written in the present tense unless the surface grammar or the exact form of word requires it. Now I could say mounting here.
but
Mount,
mounted sounds better because French resistance evokes something from the past. I mean, it doesn't have to, but
but even lots of historical clues. I mean, people write clues about what happened
oh,
in
that's
ancient
true.
Rome. They
Hmm.
still use words. Um, Mounting battle. I think my main issue with that is it looks more like mounting belongs to Belgium than battle. Whereas
I like the surface of mounted better.
mounted battle sounds like I've done something to the word battle, whereas Belgium mounting battle. I'm going to stick with past tense on
So
that one.
that's interesting, very interesting to me. And I know we're running a little long, but um, that you care, that you care about that potential misdirection. is interesting. So you really want to indicate pretty much upfront that mounted is not going backwards to Belgium, it's going forward to battle.
In some cases, I want it to be ambiguous.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes you don't want it to be clear at all whether the instruction refers to the word before or after. Um, I'm very careful with tenses because I got pulled up a lot early on, especially by Fez, who you know and love, who's got a very sharp eye for like the precision of exactly what form of words you use. Um, but I think, even if he disagreed, I think in this instance, mounted works. So I like mounted. I'm glad I finally spotted that I left war in plain sight. I did not need to do that. Um, I was just checking it's okay to say war and battle are the same thing. Uh, war is a state of conflict. Is a battle a state of conflict? I mean, I could just say conflict, couldn't I? Conflict's an interesting one because it can mean a conflict of any size. So it can mean a war, a battle, an argument, a disagreement. Um, but brawler and fighter work. B for Belgium works. Mounted conflict. French resistance is a phrase, even though it's the French and resistance.
Okay.
So I'm happy with brawler now. It works. It works backwards and forwards. I'm fine with that. It's a duck and a rabbit. Um, I will whiz back through and highlight the definitions in these and write notes for solutions. Um, so the one that I said I'd come back to, I think my only issue with this is I think it's too straightforward, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. This is kind of like a proof of concept game, so I don't know whether I should worry about whether things are too difficult or too easy. Um,
And
I
also,
think
uh, this is going to give you one of the letters in six across. So
which is very useful, yes,
yeah.
because I'd be amazed if people knew that off the top of their head. That is going to be a workout and check. Um, so I think business meaning CO is. So here's the thing, you're a relatively new solver compared to me. If you saw that, would parts of it jump out as being absolute write-ins? Or like, do you see CO and think that's business?
I see working right away.
The way around, I mean, if you see business, do you think CO?
Not necessarily.
If you
Corporate.
see working, do you see on?
Yes, I
Is
see
that
on right away. I would see CO eventually. I mean, if it's a corporation, I would see it. Yeah.
but extremely trustworthy is extremely a screamer. I mean, do you see extremely and think I'm
Yep.
taking the letters of what
Yep.
follows there?
I would solve this. Not as fast as other people, but I would get this one. Yep.
I just want to look quickly to see if there's anything else to do with the outer letters. So extremely trustworthy works because it's a qualifier for the word trustworthy, so it makes sense in the sentence. Um, uh,
Got this.
right. So this is interesting.
This.
Industrialist, if we think about real cliches, are industrialists trustworthy, or should I actually use a different TY word and make extremely heartless? Um, because industrialists are heartless, they're capitalists.
Well, ain't nothing.
So heartless is a slightly less obvious outer letters indicator. Heartless actually is slightly controversial. Some people say the heart is the very middle, so heartless will be removing the middle one or two letters. So what I might say, which I think is much clearer about getting everything out, is gutless. Heartless works better in the surface meaning, but I think gutless is a more precise instruction. Do you
Yeah, I
see the
think I
difference?
think I think Heartless is too on the nose. Like too stereotypical. So I think
But
Gutless has a
also,
little more
but
charm.
I'm less bothered about that, and I'm more bothered about the fact that the heart of the
Yes,
word
yeah,
that
I do see your
right
point. Hmm.
is is a more precise instruction than everything apart from the outer letters.
Yeah.
Um, I think heartless works as the indicator. I just want to find a word that follows that. Um, that I could put for industrialist. Um, and it doesn't need to be an adjective now because I could make it an industrialist that works in technology. Technology. Because then you could pick your favorite tech bro that this could be about. Is it Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg? So the business is working to support a gutless technology industrialist.
I would I would think about a different word for industrialist just because of like the rhythm of the sentence, the flow of it.
Yes, yes, I do see that. I was going to look back at what other words I could use for um this one. Mogul. Do you like mogul?
I think the clue is very gettable.
Business working, COON, to support gutless technology, TY, mogul. But it's a meaningful surface. It's you could that could be a description of people working for Facebook or X. I like gutless technology mogul a lot more than extremely trustworthy industrialist. That just didn't feel right. So I like that. Um, so I'm happy with all six clues. Are you?
I'm wondering if you want to indicate at all anything about Anina or just sort of let it speak for itself.
Um,
I'm sorry to even
no,
I'm sorry
I
to even
think
say that. I know you only have a couple of minutes.
what I think I would do with this is, if you're all right with it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy up the notations and correct then tag everything and put the definition underlines in and all of that. Um, I think the special instructions would briefly explain the genesis of this.
Oh yeah,
That
it's
you
interesting.
agree. Um, I'll come up with a way of alluding to the fact that there might be something to look at the grid afterwards without saying look at the grid afterwards.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I don't know how I'm going to word that. But I think the thing to do is to have a special instruction that. So the way with special instructions, if you don't want to overtly say something, you've got to come up with a form of words that when people finally click what it means, it does actually say that.
mhm.
But you don't over. So it's almost like writing a cryptic clue in itself. You've got to
Yeah.
imply that what you meant. And a good example of this is uh, and I've done this. I've done this on the one that you showed earlier on. In the one of mine you showed earlier on, I said something about hints in the clues.
Mhm.
Hints has got a special meaning in crossword parlance. Hints is the first letter. So when I say hints in the clues, I mean look at the first letter of every
Yeah.
clue. So what I'd find for this, hopefully, would be a way of saying, look at the grid. Or or maybe I say something about I feature in it twice or something, but I say something that when people realize I mean the Nina,
Yeah.
it retrospectively makes sense without me saying when you finish, look at the grid.
Yeah. You could
Um,
just peek at six. You could just skim through 6 or 7 Gennaro puzzles and get get Nina hint ideas rather
yeah.
quickly.
I'll,
I'm just gonna.
right.
Okay. All right. There's the handsome face that I was looking to see. So
Are, are you reasonably happy with what we ended up with there?
I think so. Yeah, I really am very, very curious to hear what this experience was like for you. Was it enjoyable at all?
I do get the feeling that I'd love to see a version of this where you edit out so many of the poses that it makes it look like I write at lightning speed. Right. if you can speed it up to like 1.25 speed or something, because I don't usually take that long to write 6 clues, but I think a big part of this was somebody else coming up with the words for me to clue because
Interesting.
most of the time, if I don't like a clue, I just bin it and use a different word completely. Um,
So when you're selecting words for your grid, you're almost seeing potential almost as you select them, or a couple options.
um, not so much whilst I'm selecting them. I think sometimes it happens. Sometimes you've got a very long list of options. I will sort of look
Mhm.
to see if something jumps out of as having potential. But I think generally it's more a case of I'll fill a grid, and if I hit a word that I'm really struggling to clue, I will just try to replace it, even if that means replacing words around it. Obviously, that's harder if you've got a constraint, like a theme or a Nina, or some sort of special instruction that you have to follow. I think the majority of the time in that situation, I'll just unravel, even if it's like unraveling a whole corner to eradicate a word I don't want to clue.
Got it.
But I
Um,
think, as I've said before, I don't generally mind scrapping an entire grid and starting again. So,
mhm. Would you
but,
recommend
but
this? Would you
you
recommend
want,
this activity to anybody else?
um, I would recommend somebody else did this, if only to make somebody else suffer, and hopefully they find it as difficult as I found it much more difficult than I expected.
Why is that?
Um, I think part of it is inherently somebody watching you do what you normally do
Yeah, yeah.
solo in your own head. Um, but I think a big part of it was not choosing the words. Um, uh, but yeah, I think the just the pressure of somebody watching you do it's that silly thing. I mean, I felt like I couldn't type or spell words because somebody
Yeah,
was watching me do it. But
yeah.
I
And
think
then
it's
if
just
you're, yep, if
the,
you're
the
talking,
observation thing makes things more stressful. But generally speaking, I think yeah, if you could edit it down slightly, I think it's an accurate representation of how I would fill a grid. Yeah,
great. I think it's yeah, I think it's encouraging. I'm glad it took a while. I know you didn't want it to take this long,
I think for
but
the
it,
sake of the viewer, you could definitely edit out some of the longer
yeah,
bits.
sure, for sure. But it's encouraging that because sometimes you might think that other people have some sort of magic potion, and that's why they're so good, or that's why they could produce so much. And a couple weeks ago, Postmark was a guest with the Cryptic Mystic, and they did.
Yeah, what's that?
It
Yeah,
was such a
yeah,
good episode, and one of the things that made me feel good in a lot of different ways was that Postmark said it took him about 4 or 5 days to do the puzzle, and
yeah,
that's nice to hear because these things take a long time, and I would imagine he probably could go faster if he wanted to, but I think he appreciates quality. But then also
yeah,
it's good to see. I think it's good for anyone who's watching this to see that these things take time, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And Mark made the really good point that he used to be quicker and he slowed down deliberately
Yeah,
because that's how he gets the quality in.
yeah,
And there's definitely something to say for that. I think with minis, I've cobbled together some minis very quickly, but just because I had a brain fart of an idea and I thought, will that work in a puzzle? And I think I don't mind doing minis, like kind of like quick and dirty like that. Regular puzzles um, take me a lot longer, and I generally put them to one side for quite a while and come back to them. I've got puzzles in my list that I started last August that I don't think are quite there yet, but
yeah.
I'll revisit those at some point.
Oh,
But yeah, this was a weird experience, but a fun one.
good. That's going to be
I
my
don't
my
ever want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it.
yeah. I'm going to start taking recruits to see if anybody else wants to do something similar. Um,
Yeah, make it
very
a
cool.
challenge.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you
Um,
and go ahead. Go ahead.
uh, yeah, just let me know when you want me to actually publish the puzzle itself.
Sure. We'll be in touch.
Brilliant.
And I'm glad you had a good time, and I'm glad it was weird. It's a nice combination.
I love new experiences, so that's why
Yeah.
I agreed.
So for a weird good time, then this activity would be recommended for anybody out for a weird good time. Uh,
Yes, if that's what you're into, yeah.
Thanks so much, man, and great to see you. Yeah,
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm looking forward
you're
to seeing
very
the
welcome. Me too. Me too. I'll talk to you soon.
Cool.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good night.
Ah.